Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. And what about that breakfast this morning? I tell you what, I'm a big fan of biscuits and gravy and bacon, and that was out of this world. Let's give the hand to everyone that made that breakfast this morning. That was great. Now, being a whistleblower, I mean, you guys saw the bio that was sent in the email. I'm not one to tell secrets, not one to tell anything. I mean, I'm known as one of the highest level whistleblowers in U.S. history. But I was told not to say something here this morning, that Rob Gonzalez had 5 cinnamon buns. But I'm not a whistleblower, so you wouldn't expect me to say anything. So, thank you for having me this morning. I think there's three threads that I hope that you glean from this message. I'm going to be sharing a story, a big part of the story, when I didn't have God in my life, when I didn't know Jesus, so when I wasn't a Christian. So I'm going to share the story from a perspective of someone that wasn't a Christian. But as Jason said, people who reached out, I'm going to talk about a wife that reached out, who became a Christian before I did. And talk about marriage and what God says about marriage. Talk about 2 guys that reached out to me, as Jason had mentioned, that discipled me. And they saw their workplace as a ministry. So I'm going to share that thread also. And also there's a thread about no matter what adversity you go through, with God you can get better and not bitter. Because that's the only 2 choices. When you go through adversity, and none of you are going to wear a wire for 3 years, and none of you are going to go to federal prison, I hope. But the bottom line is every one of you are going to go through adversity. And with God in your life, God will give you hope. And you can get through adversity. And I'm going to share how Ginger and I and our 3 children, how God got us through that adversity. So those are the 3 threads that I really want to share today. And especially in the beginning, like I said, from a perspective of a non-Christian, but Christians reaching out to me and planting that seed and introducing me to God and introducing me to Jesus. So the adversity that I went through was I met 4 FBI agents at 6 o'clock every morning, and they would shave my chest every morning. They would hook microphones to my chest. They put a tape recorder at my back with an athletic band. They had a second tape recorder in a briefcase and a third tape recorder in a notebook every morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. And then they would send me off to work, and I would tape and record my supervisors, my friends, my colleagues. Anybody came in touch with me during the 9 or 10 hours during that day were on tape. No matter if they were involved with a crime or not, they were taped. Then I'd meet with them at night, the FBI agents, and turn over all the tapes, have all the debriefings, often until midnight. And they told me that would be about a 6-week journey. They met me at 6 o'clock every morning, 4 FBI agents, wired me up every day for 3 years. It wasn't a 6-week journey, it was a 3-year journey. And I'm going to share you that journey. I'm going to share the journey from a like I said, from a perspective of a non-Christian, but talk about the Christians in my life that planted the seed that changed my life forever. So that's the adversity that I went through. The company I was wearing a wire against is no average company. It's known as ADM, Archer Daniels Midland. What you had for breakfast this morning, what you have for lunch today, and what you have for dinner tonight likely will have something from ADM in it, one of the largest food additive companies in the world. It'd be difficult to buy a food and beverage at a grocery store that doesn't have something from ADM in it. You look at Coca-Cola and Pepsi, almost everything in that is produced by ADM except the water in the can. When you look at Coca-Cola and Pepsi, orange juices, breakfast cereals, Kellogg's cereals, 4 ingredients are in Kellogg's cereals. Kraft, Pillsbury. Like I said, it'd be difficult to buy a processed food that doesn't have something from ADM in it. And I want to make it really clear right now that ADM, with 32,000 employees, back when I joined them also in 1989, just like today, and I know they have a large manufacturing plant here in Chattanooga, I want to tell you those 32,000 employees went to work doing the right thing morally and ethically every day. ADM is a great company, has great employees, but they had 4 bad apples at the top. 4 rotten apples that treated that company like it was their own personal company. And I was one of those 4 bad apples, and all 4 of us went to federal prison, and we deserved everything we got. So I wanted to make it clear, ADM's not a bad company. It doesn't have bad employees. It had 4 bad apples, and it was the guys at the very top, and we deserved what we got. But the company itself is a great company. When I joined ADM, they were number 56 on the Fortune 500, which means the 56th largest company in America, public company. Today, they're number 41 largest public company in America today with about $90 billion in revenue, still with 30,000 plus employees. When I joined them in 1989, I was the divisional president of their biotech division. So about 4,000 employees were in that division that I was responsible for out of the 30,000. And then I was also corporate vice president of the company. I was number 4 ranked executive. We had a CEO who was 75 years old. We had a president who was 69, and I was 32. And I thought I was a rock star, 32 years old, number 4 executive of the 56th largest company in America with 30,000 employees. I remember my first week at work at ADM. The CEO came back to my office, the 75-year-old. He just passed away at Thanksgiving last year at 98 years old. And he came back to my office and he introduced me to 2 pilots, 2 of the first employees I met. He said, Mark, these pilots are assigned to you. The 7 top executives each get their own corporate jet, their own Falcon 50. You're number 4, so you have a Falcon 50. These pilots are going to drive you out and show you where it's at, 2 miles from the office. And basically my first week at work, I was given a corporate jet, a Falcon 50. That's a picture of the plane. And I tell you, at age 32, I had hair back then too, by the way. At age 32, a corporate jet, and not knowing God, I had my Justin Bieber, my Charlie Sheen, my Britney Spears moment all in 1 month. I thought I was a rock star to fly it around in a corporate jet anytime I wanted to. All I had to do was call those pilots, give them 3 hours notice, and tell them where I wanted to go. I remember having lunch in Manhattan and dinner in Tucson the same day. And sometimes we didn't even have meetings even scheduled. We were just using the planes like our own personal planes, not even sometimes for business use. I mean, it was really an example of selfish leadership, not servant leadership like the way God would want us to serve. I remember the second week at work, the same CEO came back to my office. I kind of liked him coming back to my office. CEO came back and he said, Mark, you moved your family from Germany yet, Frankfurt, Germany? I said, no, we're looking at homes. And by the way, Decatur, Illinois has 80,000 people, where ADM's headquarters, 80,000 people population, and 30,000 are employees. 30,000 out of 80,000. So talking about a company town. It's a company town about 3 hours south of Chicago. So the CEO came back to my office, asked me if I moved my family yet. Said I told him we were looking at homes. I was only been there a week, and he said, why don't you buy my home? And I said, well, why would you sell your home? And he said, well, I've lived there 30 years. I'm 75 years old now. I want to move closer to the airport, something smaller. I said, well, tell me a little bit about your home. He said, well, it's 13,000 square feet. It's got an 8-car garage. It's got 3 golf greens on the property. It's got riding stables that your kids can ride horses in the winter in a heated arena. When it's 0 degrees outside, they'd be riding horses, and it'd be 60 degrees in the arena. I'm hearing all this, and I'm thinking, I'm only 7 years out of college. I'm 32 years old. And I thought, well, that sounded a little bit much for me. And so I told him that. I said, well, I think I'll get something smaller here at this stage in my life. And he said, that's nonsense. He said, this was the original house that John Daniels, when he built Archer Daniels Midland 115 years earlier. He said, it's always been the CEO's house. And he said, I can see a young guy like that has aspirations to be CEO. You buy my house, you may be CEO someday. And boy, for that, I wanted to buy his house. I think he hired me just to buy his house. So I said, well, I'll look at it. I'll talk to the banks. He said, well, Mark, let me tell you something. I'll give you a $500,000 startup bonus today. This is my second week at work. A $500,000 startup bonus today. This man was worth about $7 billion at that time. He said, I'll give you $500,000. He said, I own all the banks in Decatur. I've been CEO for 30 years, so I own all the banks. I'll give you a good low interest rate, and you just buy my home. So that's what I did my second week. I bought this home, 3 golf greens, horse riding stables, 8-car garage. What's a 32-year-old dude that don't know God, is full of himself, do with an 8-car garage? He fills it up, and boy, did I. Look out, Bon Jovi. Within a few months, I had a Ferrari. I had 2 Mercedes, 2 BMWs. I filled that with about $2 million worth of cars. My base salary at that time was $350,000 a year base salary, but the contract they gave me, keep in mind this is 1989, the contract they gave me with performance parameters, if I met them, it was $3 million a year with bonuses and stock options on top of base salary. And I made that $3 million a year every year for almost 7.5 years that I was there. So like I said, this was a man that felt like he was a rock star. This was a narcissistic life. This is an example of what I'm describing to you of narcissism. If you don't have God and you're full of yourself, you're heading towards a narcissistic life. And I know I lived it. And I felt like, boy, everything's for me. Everything we did in that company, what can I do to move up quicker? What can I do to get a bigger bonus? It was me is what it was all about. So now you'd say, Mark, you're 32 years old. You're divisional president of one of the largest companies in the world, 56 on the Fortune 500. Your CEO's 40 years your senior. Your vice chairman who you report to is 69 years old. Why in the heck would you blow the whistle on your own company? Well, the reason why I blew the whistle on ADM is because I didn't. My wife, Ginger, did. And I'm going to describe how that happened. By the way, I've known Ginger, who's here. She'll be coming up for the Q&A here in a few minutes. I've known her almost my whole life. I met her when she was 13 and I was 14. We met when she was in 7th grade and I was in 8th grade. We went to our high school proms together. I was senior class president. She was treasurer of her class. She was one class behind me. We were the homecoming king and queen, and we were both gifted students. But the difference is Ginger was kind of heading a direction with God in her life, and I was using this education and being a gifted student. What can I do to get ahead in life and do all for me? How can I get a bigger house, a bigger title, and a bigger career? And I was all about moving up the corporate ladder is the direction I was heading. And we've been married 38 years, and I know being married 38 years may not mean a lot to you, but I'll tell you, when you hear the rest of the story, you'll see that it's a miracle of God that Ginger stayed with me after everything I put her through. A miracle of God. So there's a marriage message here too that we're going to be describing today. So Ginger set me down one day. It's November 5th, 1992. I'm 3 years with the company now. And she set me down. She said, Mark, what's going on with your life? I said, Ginger, what do you mean what's going on in my life? I'm flying around on a corporate jet. We live in a mansion with 8-car garage. Our kids, all three, go to schools that cost $30,000 or $40,000 a year each, private schools. Ginger, I said, if there's a heaven, this is it. And she said, you know what, Mark, I think you're an addict. I said, what do you mean an addict? I've never drank. I've never used drugs. All I do is work. She said, exactly, Mark, you're a workaholic. You work from the minute you get up till the minute you go to bed. I said, Ginger, 90% of my income each year is on bonuses and stock options. The more I work, the more I earn. So I have to work like this. And plus 30,000 employees, they could easily replace me. I have to work like that to keep this job. She said, you know what, Mark, I'd rather have a 2,000 square foot house. I'd rather have 2 Fords in the driveway, and I'd rather have my husband at home. She said, I'm feeling like a widow here. You're not the man I fell in love with in high school. This was a hard message to hear on November 5th, 1992. I would have been 35 years old then, 3 years at ADM, and she was 34 years old at that time. And then she said, Mark, when you come home with dinner, and you have dinner with the family when you're not traveling, which is rarely, you're rarely home, you don't even talk to the family after dinner. The last 7 months, you're on the phone from the minute you get up from the dinner table to the minute you go to bed. The last 7 months. She said, I don't even think you know what grades the kids are in. And I had got one right out of our 3 kids. I told her like I knew for sure what the grades they were in. I got one right out of the 3. That's how far I was gone into this corporate world and losing my family along the way. And then she said, why are you on the phone every night like this, Mark? The last 7 months, what's going on at ADM? I said, well, Ginger, I've been a couple years at the company now. The CEO really trusts me. He trusts me like a son. So now they're showing me how they do business at ADM, and that's why I'm on the phone at night. She said, what do you mean how they do business at ADM? Is it unique? Is it different? And I said, well, they're involved with a cartel, an international cartel. They fix the prices of all their ingredients, like high fructose corn syrup that goes into beverage, lactic acid that goes into Kellogg's cereal, citric acid that goes into orange juices. I said, they're fixing the prices of those ingredients. They've been doing it for 12 years. They earn an extra $1 billion a year doing it. And it's a price-fixing scheme, and now they're teaching me how to do it because they're getting older and won't be there at some point. She said, price-fixing, what is that? And I said, well, it's where we get together other competitors, 11 of them, and we fix the prices. And she said, well, who pays for that? And I said, basically, everybody goes to the grocery store, like all of you, and you buy $50 worth of groceries. You pay an extra $3 or $4 because the ingredients fixed in that. $3 or $4. I said, that's all, Ginger. That's all they're paying for that. She said, you mean every consumer around the world? Because ADM's got 400 manufacturing plants at that time, even more now, around the whole world. She said, everybody goes to the grocery store around the world paying that? I said, yeah, basically, everybody goes to the grocery store. Every consumer is paying $3 or $4 extra, and that's how we earn an extra $1 billion a year by doing the price fixing. She said, boy, Mark, I don't know if I can live with this. I said, what do you mean? It's $3 or $4. She said, my grandma, Ginger said her grandma, $200 a week Social Security, $800 a month Social Security. Her grocery bill is her main bill. And we're ripping them off at ADM, and we're living in a 13,000 square foot mansion with an 8-car garage. And then she said something I didn't want to hear. I didn't want to hear from her. She said this. She was going to go back in her study and pray about it, and we'd talk about it later. I knew then I was in trouble. Whenever she said she was going to pray about something, I knew ahead of time it didn't look good and sound good. So she went back in her study and prayed about an hour. She came back to see me down the family room. She said, Mark, God led her to a decision. She said, you're stealing $1 billion a year for 12 years in a row. And I said, well, Ginger, I've only been there 3 years. I've only been involved with the scheme for 7 months. So I've not been doing it for 12 years. I've not even been in the company that long. She said, yeah, but your company is, and you're a part of it now. So you're carrying on that legacy of fraud. She said, Mark, it's just, you can't do that. This is outright theft. What a perfect time to turn yourself into the authorities, she said. I said, Ginger, if I turn myself into the authorities, I could go to jail. Price fixing is illegal. I said, the CEO is best friends with President Clinton. He went to President Nixon's funeral on President Clinton's plane. He helps pay for he gives him millions of dollars for Clinton's campaign. They will come after me with everything they have if we blow the whistle on them. They're billionaires. We can't do this. She said, you know what? God will protect us, and we're going to do it. And if you don't turn yourself into the FBI, I'm going to turn yourself in, and you're going to do it today. Or she's going to do it for me. And that's how the largest price-fixing case in U.S. history, if you go to the FBI museum today in D.C., and you go through the museum, all the equipment I warned are covers in the museum. This is the largest price-fixing case in U.S. history, 11 companies, each earning $1 billion a year extra from this theft. Each company earned almost $1 billion a year from this theft, happening for over 12 years, started by a stay-at-home mom raising 3 young kids. And ladies and gentlemen, that's the difference between a whistleblower and an informant. A whistleblower is someone who sacrifices everything to do the right thing, and that's Ginger. An informant is someone sitting in front of the FBI, has a choice to start wearing a wire or go to jail, and that was me. Because that's the choice I had. After we sat for 4 hours with the FBI, I don't know how many of you ever went to the FBI and told them you're stealing $1 billion a year, but I can tell you it's an interesting reaction. That phone reached the Attorney General, Janet Reno at the time. It reached the Director of the FBI, William Sessions at the time. Like I said, it became one of the largest white-collar cases in history. And we're sitting with the FBI. We shared for 4 hours. Ginger acted like my lawyer. We took no lawyer with us, just walked in there. And then Ginger said when we were done after sharing about the case, the price fixing, Ginger said, well, we can go home now, right? The FBI said, your husband can't go home. He just confessed to $1 billion crime. I either have to arrest him today or he has to start wearing a wire tomorrow. And that's how I became an FBI informant on that day on November 5th, 1992. Now, I don't have the normal resume of a white-collar criminal. Went to Ohio State University, full scholarship for my bachelor's and master's. I was a PhD student at Cornell University at age 22. Average age was 32 for a PhD in biochemistry. And the interesting thing is I shared this same slide at Lansing, Michigan prayer breakfast about 4 years ago. And 800 people in the audience. It was a Lansing, Michigan prayer breakfast. I just said I don't have the normal resume of a white-collar criminal. Someone stood in the back and said, if you went to Ohio State University, you are a white-collar criminal. So I don't share this slide in Michigan anymore. I just keep the Cornell on there. I take the Ohio State off. These meetings were all around the world. They were in Hong Kong, in Mexico City, in Vancouver. And ADM felt safer to have these meetings outside of the country because that way the U.S. authorities couldn't catch what was going on. So they were trying to deceive the U.S. authorities. So that's why they were much more overseas than in the country. This green lamp, and this is the actual green lamp, was following us around the world. The video camera was in that green lamp. So I would tell the FBI where the meetings were going to be, what room it was going to be. They would have a court order. And if it was overseas, they would go to the embassy to go to court order. Then they would go to that country, Interpol, and say, this green lamp, we have to get it. They had to have the plug to get it into the different voltage because a lot of these countries were 220 instead of 110. And so they had to go through all that. So they had to know a few hours ahead of time to get that green lamp in the meeting room where we were going to meet because they knew they were going up against one of the biggest companies in the world. ADM spent $70 million on their legal fees, $70 million defending themselves in a 7-week trial. They prepared 5 years prior to trial. So the FBI knew they were going up against a big company, so they wanted to show a jury what was going on, not just the jury to hear the audio tapes. So the video camera was in that lamp. Then the FBI would be in the next room, and then whoever was talking, they had a remote control. They could turn that video camera to that person and zoom in on that person as they talked. someone write on the flip chart. They didn't have whiteboards back then in 92. So they had the flip chart, someone writing on that flip chart. The FBI would zoom that camera right on that flip chart. And ladies and gentlemen, that green lamp was at the Mandarin Hotel in Hong Kong, $1,000 a night hotel. 2 weeks later, that same green lamp was at the Shangri-La Hotel in Singapore, same 11 guys, sitting 5 feet from them, sitting from here to that table right there. 3 weeks after that, that same green lamp was at the Four Seasons Hotel in Chicago, same 11 guys. That green lamp was with the same 11 guys 2 or 3 times a month for 3 years, 5 feet from them. And all I can do when I look back, I say, thank God we didn't have a woman criminal among us. Because a woman criminal would have said, you know what, that green lamp is following us around the world. But when you get 11 greedy guys that got dollar signs in their heads, all they could think is of dollar signs, because I saw firsthand as an informant, greed blinds you. Greed blinds you, and that's what they thought about, and they didn't see what was 5 feet from them for almost 30 times over 3 years. I had full immunity. The FBI was so appreciative. When the FBI would wire me up, they would say, Mark, if these guys catch you, they're going to kill you. And they would have. Ginger and I know them, and they absolutely would have. They said, this is dangerous stuff. This is serious stuff. There's a documentary on my website by Discovery Channel in 2010. And if you watch that, you can see how serious stuff that was. That's with the 4 real FBI agents involved in this case on that documentary. And it's on my website, markwhitacre.com, the full documentary. One of the longest scenes in this documentary is the scene I'm about ready to describe right now. I had full immunity for wearing a wire. The FBI was so appreciative. All I had to do is stay out of my own way. I got a Cornell PhD, Ohio State, bachelor's, master's. I should be able to do the right thing, stay out of my own way, not become a defendant. It's all I had to do. It said there clearly in that immunity agreement, if you don't break the laws on any other case besides price fixing, you have full immunity, never to be charged. That's all I had to do. Well, I'm out on the driveway. The documentary shows this. It's 3 in the morning, 2 years wearing a wire, horrific thunderstorm in Decatur, Illinois. Our neighbors saw me out there too. It was all in the newspapers. I'm out on the driveway, 3 in the morning, blowing leaves off with a gas leaf blower. 3 in the morning. I was losing. 2 years wearing a wire at that point. I had another year to go still of wearing a wire. Ginger heard that gas leaf blower. I had my microphone still in my chest, had my shirt and tie on, blowing leaves off during this horrific thunderstorm. She comes out on the driveway. She said, Mark, what are you doing? Look at this storm. She had an umbrella over her head. She said, it's 3 in the morning. She said, you got to meet the FBI at 6. I said, Ginger, I know I got to meet the FBI at 6. I've been meeting them at 6 every morning for 2 years. And I said, it's all your fault that I have to meet with them. You're the one that got me in this mess. It's easy you to force me to turn myself in, but I'm the one wearing a wire day in and day out. She goes, Mark, you need God in your life. I said, why would I need God? They just announced in Fortune magazine 2 months ago, when the president retires, I'm taking his place. I'm going from divisional president to company president. I'm going from number 4 executive to number 2. Report right to the CEO. Why would I need God? She said, oh, Mark, you're delusional. She said, you need God more than ever. We all need God. I said, what do you mean I'm delusional? She said, one, you're out on the driveway at 3 in the morning blowing leaves off the driveway. That don't look odd to you? And I said, no, everybody does this. She didn't buy that one. And she said, you're delusional. She said, you think you're the next president? I said, Ginger, I showed you. Fortune magazine says it. It's been announced when our president retires, I'm taking his place. I'm going to be the number 2 of the 56th largest company in America, 30,000 employees. She said, Mark, the only reason why they announce you're the next president, they don't know you're the informant. There's 17 board members. The board members of the CEO is his son. Is a board member, his daughter, his nephew, his brother. It's mostly family. When they find out that you're the informant, they're going to fire you. You think they're going to go to jail and you're going to go to work like nothing happened? I said, yeah, I'm going to keep going to work there when they go to jail. She said, boy, Mark, you definitely need God. And then she went back in and called the FBI and tried to have me hospitalized that day. And the FBI would not allow me to be hospitalized because they knew if I went to the hospital, a doctor would say, you can't be wearing a wire. And they didn't want the case to stop, so they wouldn't let me be hospitalized. They told Ginger it'd only be another week or 2 I'd have to wear a wire. It was another year that I wore a wire every day. So I thought I was going to be the next president. She walked back in the house. I stayed out during that storm, and I thought, you know what, Ginger's right. I'm in denial. I'm going to get fired when they learn that I'm the one collecting all the evidence. I'm on a witness stand witnessing against these other executives, I'm going to get fired. Then I started realizing that, and I thought, well, what am I going to do? I got this mansion. I looked at those garages, the golf greens, the horse stables across the street. How am I going to keep this living? How am I going to keep my kids in the private school? I had that for 7 years at that point. Then I thought, well, maybe they give me a golden parachute. And I thought, if I'm a witness against them, they're not going to give me a golden parachute. They're not even going to pay my legal fees. Then I thought, well, what I'll do, I'll write my own golden parachute. They just announced I'm the next president. The accountants are scared to death of me, knowing that I'm the next president. I'll write my own golden parachute. Then I thought, well, how much should I write? Then I thought about my stock options. I had a stock options that was 2 years from being where I could exercise it. You know, with stock options, you don't get the stock price, you get the gain. And right now at that gain, it was worth about $9 million, the gain of my stock. But I couldn't cash it for 2 more years, exercise it. So I couldn't exercise it. So I thought, well, if ADM did turn me in, if I write that $9 million to myself now, and if they turn me in, I got something I can show a jury that ADM owes me $9 million. Sure, maybe I took it 2 years early, but that's what they were going to owe me. So I thought that would, if anything ever came up, that would get me off the hook. And then I thought, well, ADM can't turn me anyway. They're stealing $1 billion a year for 12 years in a row. How can they turn me in for $9 million? So I went in the next day, wrote a check for $3.5 million to myself. I wrote 5 checks that equated to $9 million. The president came up to me with one of the checks. He said, you're getting a little greedy, aren't you? But he couldn't turn me in. He's stealing $1 billion a year. So all he did is said, slow down, Mark, slow down. You've taken enough. So I thought, boy, I'm the smartest guy in the room here. Thank God I went to Cornell. I thought, when they go to jail and I get fired, I got $9 million. I got 3 years what I'm used to earning. $3 million a year, I got $9 million. I built my own severance package. And a jury, if it ever comes up, I'm good because I could prove that I had $9 million owed to me 2 years down the road. The day that ADM learned that I was the whistleblower against them, when the case went public and the FBI raided all the offices, took all their computers, took all the paperwork to support what was on tape, that very day the ADM called the FBI, ADM called the media and said, Mark Whitacre's no white knight informant. He stole $9 million from us the same time he worked for the FBI. So basically, the ADM knew I put them in flames. They were going to put me in flames for that $9 million. They said, if I put them in flames and going to go to jail, they're going to make sure I go to jail for that $9 million. Now, when the FBI challenged me on the $9 million, I said, well, they're going to owe me that 2 years from now. I got stock options to prove it. All of you know you can't exercise stock options 2 years early. I was hit. There was no way I could get out of that. No way. I tried everything I could. Believe me, I told every story I could tell. There's no way I was going to get out of that. But they did say this. They came and met with Ginger and I in my family room. That was the first Ginger knew about the $9 million. And let me tell you, when she heard about $9 million after I wore a wire for 3 years, she went through the roof. But I couldn't tell Ginger. She already told on me on the price fixing. I couldn't tell her about the $9 million. So there's nobody I could tell during that time. Like I said, I thought I had it in the bag. So the FBI said they're going to do everything they can to get me the best plea deal they can get me. They went to the prosecutors in Chicago, and they said, look, Mark Whitacre helped solve a $12 billion crime. Each company, 11 companies, $1 billion each. He was cracking under pressure. We don't even take our own FBI agents, they told the prosecutor. They don't take them undercover more than a year because they crack under pressure. Mark Whitacre's wife was calling us. He was blowing driveways off in thunderstorms at 3 in the morning. He didn't know what he was doing when he wrote these checks to himself. And we want to give him the best deal we can give him. The prosecutor said we can't give full immunity because now the media, it's been reported in the newspapers about the $9 million. But we'll give him a 6-month plea deal, the prosecutors in Chicago said. 6 months in a white-collar camp like Martha Stewart went to. No fence, no razor wire, just a white-collar camp for 6 months. Deal of a lifetime. My lawyer, who's a judge now in Chicago, called me into his office in Chicago. Ginger was with me. He said, Mark, the FBI agents got you a deal of a lifetime. 6 months in federal prison, a white-collar camp, no fence, 6 months and it's over with. Ginger said, Mark, I'm begging you to sign this. Let's put this behind us. You made a huge mistake. 6 months is a gift. Take it. I looked at Ginger and I said, Ginger, you're the one who got me in this mess, as I told you before. I'm going to do the opposite you want me to do. I took that 6-month plea deal and I threw it in a trash can. I fired that lawyer who was my lawyer who was helping me tremendously. And I hired a whole group of lawyers the next day and I fought the case for 3 years in the courts to get a 10.5-year sentence 3 years later. and I had a 6-month deal right in my hand. I was my own worst enemy every step of the way. I went from full immunity, and with a $9 million, I had an offer of 6 months, and I threw it in a trash can and got a 10.5-year sentence 3 years later by fighting that case. Biggest mistake I'd ever made of my life. And I had a deal of a lifetime in my hand. I went from just like Michael Milken, the Enron executives, the WorldCom executives, from handcuffs, from a corporate jet on national TV to handcuffs in jail. And it wasn't for 6 months in prison. It was for 8.5 years, because in the federal system, there's no parole. There's parole in state cases, but not in federal cases. You get 15% off good behavior, so I had to do 8 years and 8 months on a 10.5-year sentence, and I could have done 6 months. Boy, did I show Ginger. I said, Ginger, I'm going to show you. I'm going to throw this in this trash can. Boy, I showed her, didn't I? Had an 8.5-year sentence that I had to do. Well, that's where the movie ends. That's the movie The Informant. That's Ginger and I, as with Jason said, my identical twin, Matt Damon. I'm not his father. I'm his twin. And I'm living proof right here on the stage. You guys can see that I'm his twin. I'm the one on the right, by the way, if you don't know which one I am. These are some of the books and documentaries on the case. 3 books written on the case. First one by New York Times. Second one by an antitrust lawyer named James Lieber, Rats in the Grain. Ginger and I wrote that 3rd book. It came out 10 years later than the other 2, called Mark Whitacre Against All Odds. We hired a ghostwriter to write our story. It's sold in Christian bookstores. And then the movie The Informant was done based on the book from New York Times, The Informant. But the book, The New York Times, The Informant, it's like reading The Firm. It's a real serious drama. But Hollywood wanted to kind of take a different twist to it, and they made a comedy of it. And the FBI was so upset it was a comedy, 6 months later, they did the documentary to combat the comedy. And that's what's on my website called Undercover, but the Discovery Channel in 2010. And that's on markwhitaker.com. So those are some of the things reported on the case. Did life end when I went to prison almost 19 years ago in 1998? I can tell you, I thought life was going to end. When I could have had 6 months and now I knew I had 8.5 years, I thought life was coming to an end. But what I want to share is the rest of the story, what's happened these last 20 years. Well, first thing that happened, I wrote a 17-page letter to Ginger. I wrote letters to my kids, and I tried to kill myself twice. I didn't want to live. I couldn't imagine going to prison for 8.5 years, almost 9 years. I wasn't even willing to go for 6 months. You can imagine how I felt to go for almost 9 years, from age 41 to age 49. I said, I can't survive this. The family can't survive this. I looked at the divorce rates. Divorce rates, if you go to prison, is 78%. If you go to prison for 5 years and longer, it's 99% divorce rate. 30-year measure, 99% divorce rate if you go 5 years or longer. So I said, I'm not going to have a family. My family's not going to be with me. Who's going to hire me? Even with an Ivy League PhD in biochemistry, who's going to hire somebody 9 years out of jail, convicted felon, coming out age 49? Why live? And I tried to take my own life. Well, this man here, and that's why I said a second message thread that I really wanted to share today, is about where God shows us to look at our work as a ministry. But this man here that I'm showing now, his name is Ian House. He read about me in the newspapers. He was reading all the things that I described to you today. He read about the suicide attempt. That hit all the newspapers where I tried to take my own life. And he showed up, took him a while to even find me, and he showed up and wanted to talk to me. And he said, Mark, I want to tell you something. He was on my front porch, and he said, prison's going to be the beginning of your life, and you're going to find your true purpose in life for the journey you're ready to start. I ran back to the kitchen. I said, Ginger, there's somebody on the porch that's crazier than I am. She said, that can't be. And then I said, he said that prison's going to be the beginning of my life, and I'm going to find my true purpose in life with this journey. And she fell to her knees and started crying. She said, Mark, thank God that God sent somebody. Thank God. She said, I pray you go out and listen to this man. So I went back out with Ian. I said, Ian, what do you have in mind? He said, well, he's CFO of a pharmaceutical company, but he's also part of a group called CBMC, Christian Businessmen Connection. I know a lot of guys from CBMC are here in this room. And he said he wanted to have a study. He had a study called Operation Timothy. How many of you ever heard of Operation Timothy? A lot of you. He said he wanted to share that with me. He wanted to walk me through that. He wanted to introduce me to Jesus. I said, Ian, hold off. I've been going to church my whole life. My family forced me to go to church when I was young. I've been going to church with Ginger and the kids because I know it's the right thing to do. I already go to church. He said, Mark, I'm not talking about going to church. I'm talking about having a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what I'm talking about. A relationship with Jesus. And I want to introduce you to him. And he started taking me through Operation Timothy and planted a tremendous seed in my life. That was about 7 months before I went to prison. 2 weeks after I got to prison, this man showed up, as Jason stated. 2 weeks. Yazoo, Mississippi. I'm in prison, still trying to think, should I kill myself? Should I listen to Ian? I didn't know where I was heading yet. I didn't have God in my life yet, but an important seed was planted. And Chuck Colson showed up. I didn't even know who he was at that time. And he told me, he said, Mark, he said he went to an Ivy League school, Brown University, became a lawyer, became at the top of his game in the White House. He was White House counsel under President Nixon. He said he was very similar to my age, in his 30s at that time. And he said he went to jail for $20 a month, and it was the best thing that ever happened to him. And he started telling me all the same things Ian Howes was telling me. Introduced me to Jesus. And I told Chuck, I said, look, I'm going through a study called Operation Timothy. He was familiar with it. And I said, I'm being introduced with Bible study to Jesus. But I said, as a scientist, all I learned at Cornell that God didn't exist from all the other scientists, all my professors. He said, Mark, you think there's no scientist that believes in God? I said, I don't think there's any scientist that believes in God. He said, boy, how wrong you are. And he started sending me article after article and book after book of all these scientists that believed in God. And one of them, it was published in 1992. He sent it to me. It was 1998 by a guy named Don Beerley at University of Minnesota. In this book, this scientist, this famous biologist, who I knew at the time, he was trying to prove that God didn't exist to all his friends. And after studying it for 10 years, he wrote the book Surprised by Faith, because it proved to him God did exist. And that book, along with all the other articles he sent me, even Albert Einstein quoted that the universe and man, impossible, the Big Bang Theory. Only God could create the universe and man. So I saw these scientists that I believed in and I trusted in and I had great respect for, believed in God. So that, along with Operation Timothy, being introduced to Jesus, my 3rd month in prison, I surrendered my life to Jesus on a concrete floor, 10 by 10 room, and a locker and a roommate. After being in a 13,000 square foot house for 7.5 years, I had a 10 by 10 for 9 years, $20 a month for 9 years, and I surrendered my life to Jesus June 4th, 1998, my 3rd month in prison. And best decision I ever made in my life. I felt a peace and comfort that I had never felt in my life before. I felt like finally I had hope I could get through this. I wasn't thinking of killing myself anymore. I said I can get through this for my family. And maybe our family can stay together. If God wants us to stay together, we'll stay together. That next morning, I started having my quiet time after I surrendered my life, and Chuck Colson and Ian Howes helped me build that quiet time. And Chuck Colson continued to build in me almost monthly for those 9 years I was in jail. He became like a father to me till he passed 5 years ago in 2012. And I thought, well, what would be my purpose in life here in prison? I said, I got 8.5 years yet. What would be my purpose be? And I looked at those 4 Operation Timothy books. They were called the OT Classic, published in 95. This was 1998. And I thought what my purpose could be. And I looked at those 4 books on my desk. The only books I had were those Operation Timothy books and a Bible. And I thought, what better place to give people hope is in federal prison. So I started taking guys one by one through Operation Timothy, just like Ian Howes and Chuck Colson did me. And I took 61 guys through Operation Timothy through 9 years of jail, one by one. They were the most productive 9 years of my life. At $20 a month for 9 years after earning $3 million a year for 7.5 years. Most productive years of my life. Because for the first time in my life, I was serving somebody else besides myself. And I learned what a servant leader is because I was a selfish leader my whole life prior to that. I helped them get their GEDs, learn how to read, learn how to write. You can't imagine how proud I was to see them go through the prison graduation and get their GEDs. I was so proud to help one guy get his 2-year degree. Junior and I went to a graduation not long ago, a few years ago, to watch a guy get his 4-year degree in business and graduate number 1 in his class. Prior to that, he was an 8th grade dropout. I helped him get his GED. Then I helped him get a 2-year degree in prison. Now we're watching him. He was married and family and children, and he was graduating number 1 in his class. I can't tell you how rewarding that was. There was no $3 million set of stock options more rewarding than that. And then God showed me what life is about. God showed me what's important in life is serving others, not ourselves, and how rewarding that is to serve himself, to serve other people. And I tell you, for that reason, I feel strongly that the purpose of my life is to be a witness for Jesus Christ. Because I'm a scientist, and I live on evidence. And I've seen the evidence in my own life that God exists. And for that, I'm going to go share, like what I'm doing here today, I'm going to share with the world about what God does until I can't get on a plane anymore. And I'm going to share that story. I shared 96 times last calendar year, almost 7 or 8 times a month. And I believe strongly it's the purpose of my life. God showed me what purpose is. Our work, there's no better place for work than ministry. Our spiritual life is just not on Sundays at church. It's taking what you learn at church on Sundays and use it during the week. And I have a lot of respect that people go to Haiti and Africa. A lot of respect. I got friends over there now that are doing mission trips. But I tell you, we don't have to look too far to see somebody in need. Sometimes it's across the hall in your own home. Sometimes it's across the hall in your own office. Sometimes it's across the street, our neighbors. But we don't have to look too far to see people who don't know God, and we can introduce them to God. And I believe that's the purpose of all of our lives here in this room today. The third thread I told you about marriage, about getting through adversity. Well, we did 3 years undercover, 9 years of jail, and we're married 38 years as of last month. A miracle of God. God will get you through. God will get you through adversity where you get better and not bitter. And our children too, our 3 children, are stronger and closer to all of us than ever. God redeemed me and pardoned me on June 4th, 1998. Then he touched the heart of my family to stay with me. Even with a 99% divorce rate, my family stayed with me. Ginger moved to Yazoo, Mississippi, my first prison. When I got sent to Edgefield, South Carolina, Ginger moved there. When I got sent to, by the way, they rank prisons just like they do universities on Forbes. And Pensacola Navy Base is the #1 ranked prison. So I got to do my last 5 years there, and Ginger moved there. So with good behavior, you get to move to a better prison. And Ginger moved all 3 of those prisons. She came 20 hours a weekend with my kids for 9 years. 5 wives out of 700 inmates came. 5 out of 700 inmates. And they added her days up from prison records and against all odds, and it added up to 3 years and 8 months that she spent 8 hours a day in federal prison. Added up in 3 years and 8 months. Every Friday night, every Saturday, and every Sunday. It's the only time she was allowed in to the prison. She was there for 9 years and moved to 3 different states to live next to those prisons. A miracle of God. My family and our children and our daughter-in-law on the far right there, the one that looks the most like us is our daughter-in-law in front of Ginger. Closer and stronger than ever. Miracle of God. Miracle of God to keep our family together. The food companies we stole from, we lost everything we had. I had $4 million in legal fees. I had 11 lawyers. Lost everything we had. Sold our house and cars to pay legal fees. Had $9 million in fines, $2 million in interest on the fines, $4 million in legal fees. We were broke. Ginger was about ready to move back home with her mom with our 3 kids because we were running out of money because of the decisions I made, the poor decisions I made. I would have left my family well financially if I had taken that 6-month sentence. But with what I did and fight through the court system, all the legal fees, we lost everything we had. The food companies we stole from won $3 billion back from all the producers of those products. Coca-Cola alone won $400 million back, which is the largest class action suit that was repaid for the price fixing, for the theft. Ginger got a call from a law firm in Washington, D.C. They said, Ginger, if it wasn't for you, price fixing would still be going on for 12 years. And it was a lawyer named Ken Adams that was representing all the companies that were the victims of the price fixing case. And they gave Ginger and my kids a trust fund to get them through the 9 years I was in jail. A miracle of God. The people I stole from took care of my family for 9 years. That's a miracle of God. God touched their hearts to take care of my family. The FBI agents and prosecutors, I'm going to end with a short news clip here just in a second, about a minute and a half long, about how the FBI, you think they would forget me and throw away the key. Think about it. I was wearing a wire for them. I stole $9 million when I was working for them, when I was undercover for them. They got a 6-month plea deal for me. I threw it in a trash can. You think they'd throw away the key and forget about me. I'm going to share where they've even forgiven me and given me a second chance. God touched their hearts to give me a second chance, just like God touched my family's heart. I thought I'd never get another job. Another reason why I wanted to take my own life. Who's going to hire somebody, convicted felon, 9 years in jail? Cornell University professors that I had when they were in their 40s were now in their 70s, and they were visiting me in prison. And they remembered me as a student. And they started bringing companies in to meet me in prison, just like a recruiting ground at university. And they had 4 offers for me in the biotech pharmaceutical industry the day I got out of jail. 4 offers the day I got out. Now, you don't start off the head of finance when you steal $9 million. I want to let you know that. But they got a job for me. As a PhD biochemist, they got me a job involved with prostate cancer research clinical trials. And I've had several promotions at that company, and I became the COO of that company, the number 2 overall finances. God redeems. God redeemed. God touched the hearts of family, the FBI, the victims of the case, and even prospective job opportunities, touched the hearts to give me a second chance. And because of those reasons right there, which statistics was against me on every one of them, that I had to keep my family, that the FBI would forgive me, that I'd get a job when I got out, statistics was against me on every one of them, and that's the evidence that I see as a scientist that God exists. And I'm going to share that. I even shared this last February of last year, even in Jerusalem, in Israel. I'm going to share this till I can't get on a plane anymore, as I mentioned, that God does exist. Short news clip about where the FBI forgave me, and just listen to this, what God can touch hearts and give second chances.
Dean Paisley is what you'd expect a 25-year veteran of the FBI to be. He's a very honest, straight shooter, and he knows Mark Whitacre very well. He was the FBI supervisor in the ADM Mark Whitacre price-fixing case, and he says this question mark should not be on this title. He says that he has no question that Mark Whitacre is a national hero. But in the early 1990s, Mark Whitacre was keeping a $9 million secret from Dean Paisley, and it was a secret he would regret.
My biggest regret would be that I didn't tell the FBI about the money issue during the time that I was working with the FBI.
But those in the FBI who were working with Mark Whitacre to build a case against ADM were shocked when their own informant was sent to prison for 9 years.
It was the first time in history that anybody had been a cooperative witness for the FBI and was prosecuted in the same case that they were assisting. It doesn't make sense.
Dean Paisley worked for the FBI for 25 years. He was the FBI supervisor during the Mark Whitacre ADM case. He is not a fan of the movie The Informant.
I know from experience going through that it wasn't a comedy. It was anything but a comedy.
Would you be willing to wear a wire? We need your help.
And the 25-year FBI veteran is also not laughing at the treatment that Mark Whitacre has received.
I always felt that he didn't get a fair shake, either from the FBI or the system. He didn't deserve all that happened to him.
Dean Paisley is now working to get a presidential pardon for Mark Whitacre, who he says is a national hero.
He helped every citizen in this world that ever bought any product from ADM. Had he not stolen that $9 million, he would have been a national hero at the highest levels, really.
Dean Paisley says he and the other main FBI officers who worked this case are now pressing for a full presidential pardon for Mark Whitacre. And at least one prosecutor who helped send Whitacre to prison is also helping in their effort.
God touched the hearts of the people that I hurt the most to give me a second chance. And there's not a day I don't wake up that I thank God for the second chance that He gave me for the last 20 years since I surrendered my life. Ginger's been asked many times, on news programs even, they ask Ginger, how'd you do it? How'd you do it? Divorce is 99% when someone serves 5 years and longer. Your husband did almost double that. How'd you do it? And Ginger said divorce is never an option for her. God did not allow her to divorce. She said she loved me even when I was unlovable. And she said when Mark was throwing 6-month plea deals in the trash can, he was unlovable. But she said God said to love him even when I was unlovable. She said murder was an option, but divorce wasn't. And she said she considered murder twice. She told me this morning she's still considering it. So then they asked her this. They said, Ginger, 6 months. You said You wanted to murder him when he didn't take that 6-month plea deal. How do you feel about that now? She says, thank God he didn't take the 6-month deal. He would have came out the same greedy man he went in. God gave him exactly what he needed, which was 9 years in prison. I think 2 or 3 years would have been enough, personally. But she said, God gave me exactly what I needed, 9 years. And I know one thing, 6 months wouldn't have been enough. Chuck Colson and Ian House come to see me with a 6-month plea deal. I'd be looking at my watch, I'm out of here in 6 months. But 9 years, I had to be broken. I had to have everything that I thought was important taken from me. I had to have that brokenness to get to know God. And I thank God for that brokenness every day. And when I got out of prison, December 2006, 11 years ago, guess what street that Ginger had a home on that I moved home to? We were in Pensacola, Florida. I got released from prison. She was visiting me 20 hours a weekend for those 9 years. And I got released to leave that house. And guess what the street name would be? Only God would give this kind of sense of humor. The street name was Iron Gate. I got released after 9 years of prison. Our house was on a street named Iron Gate. Miracle of God. What I've shared with you, the evidence. And the 3 threads that I started with, I'd like to end with. Marriage. Love your spouse even sometimes when they're unlovable. And I thank God that Ginger loved me when I was unlovable, and God guided her to do that. To go through those peaks and valleys, to get through 3 years of wearing a wire and 9 years of prison. 12 years of a living hell for my family. You can survive any adversity with God in your life. Any adversity. And I've seen it and I've lived it, and I thank God for it. Another thread I wanted that I was discussing was about using your work as a ministry. I would ask Chuck Colson and Ian House, who didn't even know each other, why do you guys do this? Ian, you got 5 kids, school age and younger. You're CFO of a pharmaceutical company. He was spending 7 or 8 hours a week with me. I said, how do you do it? He said, Mark, and Chuck said the same, our work is our ministry. This is not some side project. This is not some byproduct. Our work is our ministry. And their work is a sphere of influence. And Ian read about me, and I had a similar position in the company I was with, so he saw me in his sphere of influence. Chuck Colson read about me, and he saw the fact I was like him, Ivy League school. We were top of our game. We both ended up in federal prison. So he saw a common denominator. So he reached out to me. God put me in their paths. God puts people in all of our paths. We all have a sphere of influence. And a lot of people that don't know God. Let's face it, majority of the people out there don't know God. And God wants us to reach them and share with them and us to share what God's done in our life. Because we all have a sphere of influence. That's our purpose of our life. To disciple others, and to share our testimonies and our stories and share about Jesus with our sphere of influence. And then the third thing about marriage is also related to about adversity. No matter what adversity you go through, loss of a job, loss of a family member, a sick spouse or a child that's ill, God will carry you through it. God will carry you through it where you get better and not bitter. And the only difference between those two words, better and bitter, is the letter E, in better for eternal value. God wants you thinking way ahead of 30 years, 50 years, 60 years ahead. What we're here on earth is minuscule compared to the millions of years of eternity. And God wants us to be looking at eternity. So what we do here on earth determines what we'll do in eternity. And He wants us to be His ambassadors. 2 Corinthians 5:20 makes it so clear. Therefore, you are Christ's ambassadors. As believers in Jesus, we are His ambassadors here on earth. We represent Him. If those disciples didn't go share with others, and like in Matthew 28:19, when Jesus said, go share with all nations, go share the truth with all nations. Think about that. If those disciples didn't share, we wouldn't be here as Christians today. But those disciples now are in heaven. Who carries that on? We are those disciples to carry that on. So we are the ones to go share with our sphere of influence. And if all of us are sharing with our sphere, we're all sharing. It will then share with all nations. Just like Matthew 28:19 tells us to do. Go and share with all nations. So that's what I challenge you and I urge you today to leave here and think about the purpose God gave you and the skill set He gave you and how best He can use us every minute of the day to be a better father, a better leader, a better spouse, because that's what God wants us to do. He wants to serve Him and be His ambassador for Him our days while we're here on earth. Thank you for allowing me to share. Thank you for allowing me to share this journey, and God bless all of you. Thank you.